Welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you. Thanks for checking out the channel. If you guys could, please subscribe, hit the like button. Let's get into it. As the NBA action was getting into it today, it officially felt like the offseason was underway. I know that we had the Monty Williams news the other day and the Pascal Siakam. The Monty Williams, very shocking. Pascal, not very much. But we had action today. Shams bombs, Woj bombs, Shams, Woj wars over the J.J. Redick signing. And let me just say, as I don't want to harp this. I mean, I've been accused by some of my staff that I harp on the J.J. Redick thing too much, even though it is enough of J.J. Redick. Look, reap what you sow, Lakers. I mean, you have an organization that goes through coaches like they go through underwear. And, you hire a podcaster to go coach the most famous team in the NBA. Should go great for you guys. You guys want to win the blogs instead of the games. That's fine. You don't want to give Chris Quinn a real sniff at it. UD called that a mile away. And he also called that, I think that there is going to be some side eye. They say this is Anthony Davis. We're looking at Anthony Davis. Let's be real about it, dude. You hired LeBron's co-host. And LeBron's still running that organization. Good for him. It's exactly what he wanted. When he left Miami, he got Cleveland the championship. He wanted to go somewhere where he could just have all the power, do what he wants. And what he wanted was a podcaster as a head coach, apparently. So good luck to the Lakers. Chris Quinn, who needs him anyway, all right? Bunch of bums. And, I was talking this week on Cleveland Sports Radio. They wanted to be talking about Chris Quinn, even though I think James Borrego's probably the leading candidate over there. Our boy just can't get a sniff, man. I don't know what it is. I don't know what he's got to do. Maybe he should go podcast. Maybe when Chris Quinn is putting more hours in trying to get Duncan Robinson as sharp as a knife as he was so great this season, and a lot of that is with the work of Chris Quinn, maybe he should have just said, hey, why don't we relaunch the podcast, Dunks, and I'll be your co-host. Maybe that'll give me more of a shot to be a head coach. Anyway, speaking of UD, though, it was interesting because Udonis Haslem, some interesting comments. He's on ESPN now, and I've told you how much I love. First of all, he's great at it. And second of all, I love the fact that Heat Nation does have somewhat of a voice to put our bias in there. Everybody else gets bias. Why can't we have some Heat bias up there? And then, it may be biased, but it's soaked with a lot of credibility and rings. And, today is a great day. It's June 20th, the day of the Heat's first championship. Multiple championships have been won on this day. In fact, oh, man. You guys see Bam Adebayo? Bam Adebayo went on social media because the Heat posted they posted the championships, right? 2006, 2013. You just see Bam there. Here on the Instagram, he just goes, man. I felt that, man. Feel for you, Bam. They got to make some moves. I don't know what it's going to be. The Trae Young thing, everybody, people get mad at me about Trae 05, Ice Trae 05 coming to the Heat. He did tweet out an hourglass after the J.J. Redick news. Some people think that he's destined for the Lakers. Who knows? But my whole point of it is I just think, look, I'm not the biggest Trae Young fan in the world, but I want the Heat to, no stone unturned, kick the tires on everything. Even though this report comes out today that Paul George is, no longer in the crosshairs of the Philadelphia 76ers. What was the thing that Shams reported? Shams had a very strange report that came out, and it was the Philadelphia 76ers' interest in pursuing Paul George has significantly waned in recent days, and the franchise is expected to be aggressive elsewhere with its salary cap flexibility and draft capital leading into next week's NBA draft. This is interesting from a couple of standpoints, one of them being the Jimmy Butler aspect of it, because, there's been that rumor. In fact, today, bringing it back to the Udonis Haslem thing, this was actually mentioned on ESPN. But I want to say, as an aside for the Paul George thing, I'm not surprised because, and you may think this is a weird reason, but I talked about this, I think, on Bleacher Report. I don't know if I mentioned this on the channel, the radio show, but that NBA Finals hit that he and Joel Embiid did was so awkward because Joel Embiid, hogged the spotlight and was all over it. And then you have these reports that are coming out that, Paul George he says on his podcast, he's like, I want to play the right way. I'm not necessarily ring chasing. I want to be in a happy experience. And I got to be telling you, he looked miserable up on that desk with Joel Embiid in 3 seconds. So it was interesting to me that all of a sudden we have this reports of Paul George interest is waning from the Sixers. And really, maybe Paul George's interest in the Sixers is waning, not the Sixers' interest in him. And now all of a sudden they're going to get a guy who has played with Joel Embiid, who's friends with Joel Embiid. So maybe that's where the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes get into it. But getting to today, Jimmy was a topic on First Take. And this was Get Up, excuse me. And Jimmy Butler was the source of a hot take from Alan Hahn. If you guys don't know, he does work for the Knicks, MSG. And he was asked about a hot take. And he said that his hot take, Jimmy Butler's days with the Heat are done. He's going to go with the Sixers. That's what his hot take was. And UD, it was really a funny segment, to be honest with you, because UD is like sitting there at the end of the desk and he's like, and even, Greeny, who I'm not the biggest fan of, it was funny, like comes over, gives him a shoulder rub, like, waves the fan on to cool him off. And then they asked him, they're like, hey, UD, like, do you want to speak on this? And or can you not?
Put me over here for this one.
Can't happen, right? He can't let Jimmy Butler go, right?
No.
Are you allowed to comment on this? I've lost track.
I can't really comment on that, but
right.
if I had to guess, I mean, I would have. I don't want to talk about it.
I'm just reading.
I don't want to talk about it. I would just leave that one alone.
That's what we're supposed
I know
to do.
there are some things you're not allowed to comment on, and I don't want to get us in trouble for tampering, so we'll leave it.
But I will be calling Jimmy after the show. Okay. That's all I'm saying.
I would like to see the video of like just UD on the phone, just like, or FaceTiming with Jimmy. I think that would be really funny. But yeah, man, that was certainly interesting that Udonis Haslem didn't even want to get into it, because really it's not tampering. It's not really tampering. He doesn't want to divulge the Heat's plans or the Heat's thoughts. He's already said on ESPN he doesn't want Jimmy Butler to leave. He says when you say you're going to call Jimmy Butler after this, when you didn't say anything, there's no need to clear up anything. So I found that to be an interesting clip that you didn't want to comment on it, because it's not really, you could disagree. I don't think Jimmy's going anywhere, and maybe that sends the Heat up in the first thing. Maybe the Heat don't want that out there. I don't know. But man, listen, he's got to stay entertaining, but also, toe that line to Pat Riley. And by the way, it's not like Pat Riley's going to berate. And if he's not going to berate anybody, this is Udonis Haslem we're speaking of. But Udonis Haslem is this is a 20-year Heat lifer. He's in the family. And so he doesn't want to rock the boat saying things that maybe he's not supposed to say with the organization. But it was definitely interesting seeing his facial reactions to all this, and then his comments afterwards that he wants to call Jimmy. So I don't know. That's gonna be that's gonna be an interesting one to keep an eye on with all the stuff that's going on, because the moves are happening. They're kind of coming in hot and heavy. With today, you get Alex Caruso. He is getting traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Josh Giddey. Bulls, I mean, maybe they're finally gonna pull the grenade on blowing this whole thing up. Are there Heat things that they can get into that? Can they get into the midst of being one of the buzzard teams to circle around the Bulls? Is there anything that really interests them? Their best scorer is obviously Zach LaVine, but a lot of money, not always the healthiest. So be interesting because they're definitely, the names are starting to float out there. The names are starting to to creep out of who will be available and what the player merry-go-round is. But to get that report from Shams that Jimmy Butler, that Paul George and the Sixers' interest is waning, it definitely has to put up, the Heat antenna to be like, oh, all right, well, is this them, putting their stamp that they are gonna pursue Jimmy, and that there is gonna be this, amicable trade of, hey, we're gonna give you a bevy of picks. Maybe the Heat use those picks to go get whomever, I don't want to put a name to it, but whomever. And then, Jimmy gets his max extension with his old team, the Philadelphia 76ers, who, reportedly wise, we're treating him like a plan B, but maybe, that I'm telling you, there was something with that Joel Embiid, Paul George. Go back and watch that video and tell me it's not weird. And to see that all of a sudden, because it was Paul George, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's not, makes me think like, hey, you got to find, if you're going to find Joel Embiid the right piece, it has to be a piece that likes Joel Embiid. Jimmy and Joel have a good relationship. But, I mean, the Heat, here's the thing, though. The Heat aren't going to do it unless they have the replace. They're not going to just let the Sixers get Jimmy Butler for picks and they don't have a plan to get better right away. I just can't see the organization doing that. There's no way. They're not going to just throw. You see Bam sat on Instagram and you think that's the direction they're going to go? Hard for me to believe.